Through all the media I consumed, only a few antagonists have had a lasting impact on me. Otto Apocalypse is one of them. A clown that lost his own sense of self 500 years ago when his hero and love of his life died an unjust death caused by a world that did not deserve her. Welcome back, beautiful people. Today we're taking a deep dive into the character known as Otto Apocalypse. And this sounded just as bad as I imagined. You may know him as an evil villain, a pitiful soul, or a fool that challenged fate and won. What made him such a brilliantly written antagonist? What was the main inspiration that Hoyoverse took when they created him? And what are the most common misconceptions regarding him? All of these questions will be answered in today's video. So, this is inside the mind of the greatest Hoyoverse villain, Otto Apocalypse. It should come as no surprise that people have very polarizing opinions about Otto. Some respect him for his unwavering determination and the value he brings to the story, while others cannot forgive his wrongdoings. But no matter what opinion you have, I think it's valid, and nobody should tell you otherwise. I saw people arguing over Otto's morality while totally missing the point of his character. We, as humans, experience stories differently based on our own set of morals, past experiences, and personalities. Some people leave aside their personal feelings and enjoy the story for what it is, while others choose to look at the journey through the lens of their own values. Some can appreciate the character without sharing any perspectives, while others cannot stand them no matter how many redeeming qualities they have. Seeing people having a different opinion from yours is very normal.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I love Otto as a character and have always looked forward to seeing him in the story because he made it more interesting. I'm the type of person that removes a lot of personal baggage when I'm immersing in a fictional story. I do not associate it with real life, so I don't judge characters that harshly based on my morals unless it's something really extreme and bad. Yes, I do not agree with a lot of stuff that Otto does. But that is the beauty of fiction. We can like characters that our values and morality would never allow us in real life. If Otto would be a real person, then yes, my stance on him and his actions would change drastically. I see people calling him a villain or an anti-hero. In my opinion, none fit his character. I call Otto an antagonist, a person who opposes the protagonist. An antagonist is neither good nor bad, just an opposing force to the main characters. But what about the title of the video then? I clearly call him a villain there. Well, duh. Villains sound so much catchier than antagonist. Give me a break. He manipulated and killed people that stood in his way, tempered in unethical experiments such as cloning and testing on Honkai-resistant children for the single goal of reviving the person who was his hero and gave meaning to his life, Kallen Kaslana. I often see people downplaying the relationship between the two by saying that Otto is just a simp or that he wants to revive her to be together as lovers. That shows a lack of understanding of how deep these characters actually are. Calling Otto a simp is like calling a lion just a big cat. Technically, you're right, but there is so much more to it. To better understand their relationship, we need to go back to when it all started. While growing up, Otto was a sickly and fragile boy shunned by his family because of his condition and passion. In other words, his family were a bunch of That's when he met Kallen. She was more than a friend or a love interest to him. Kallen was his hero, the first person to believe and expect things from him. To say that he loves her would be an understatement. For Otto, Kallen is above the world. His feelings are much more complex than just simple love. He never wanted to revive her to be together with her. In fact, he knew that he will die if his plan were to be realized. For Otto, humans, himself included, are sinners that caused the death of Kallen, who in his eyes encapsulated all the good and beauty in the world. No other lives mattered, and that's why he did all those atrocious things with so little remorse. And you may ask, why does he do all of this knowing that she would not want it? And here lies both the beauty and the ugliness of Otto. Yes, he knew that Kallen would rather be dead than have all the people he killed on her consciousness. He wanted to revive her because of selfishness. Not for her sake, but for himself and what he believes is right. Otto points out that his sense of self died with Kallen. He became a hollow husk of a person and wants to regain that part of himself that he lost with her death. He doesn't care about her feelings since his motivations have a deeply selfish root. Even while alive, he saw her less like a human with emotions and insecurities and more like a personification of the goodness and beauty. This is a common character trait for him. He never truly sees a human being as a person, but more like a personification of some abstract concept. There is very little individuality in his perception. This also brings me to my next point, the Jester. Throughout the story, we see Otto associate with the persona of a jester on multiple occasions. Also, a very popular inside joke in the community is to meme on Otto and call him a clown. But what is a jester or a clown? Well, a jester is a member of the household of a nobleman or a monarch employed to entertain guests during the Renaissance eras. In short, a person that makes a fool of themselves for the entertainment of the others. In Otto's case, this symbolic persona has multiple meanings. First, it's meant to represent his self-hatred. No one hates Otto Apocalypse more than himself. He is surprisingly self-aware of the action he has done. He knows that he has done wrong, but his desire to revive Kallen is stronger than his common sense. He plays a fool to justify his self-hatred and to garner hatred from the others. When he talks, he always does so in a manner that provokes and attracts contempt. He wants to be a first-class a-hole. He wants to be hated because in his eyes, that's all he deserves. Also, have you noticed that he always wears a mask when he directly involves himself in a fight? This is also a symbol of him playing the role of the villain in those moments. Otto is also what many call a Shakespearean fool. We know that he encountered Shakespeare during his life, so this kind of connection is not surprising at all. Shakespearean fools are normal jesters that act in the same way as any other, only that they are very cunning. They play their roles to gather information, manipulate and outdo people from higher social positions. Otto is no doubt a charismatic man that likes to manipulate the people around him into doing what he wants. And like a Shakespearean fool, he's always one step ahead because people always let their guard down around him. Speaking of fools, the best way for you not to become one is to subscribe to the channel if you haven't and give the video a thumbs up. Thank you very much. Just like Otto, it really helps my shallow self-esteem. Honkai Impact 3rd is a game that doesn't shy away from philosophical references, and Otto as a character is no exception. For those of you familiar with the work of the German philosopher Frederic Nietzsche, The parallels between his work and Otto should be obvious. Nietzsche is best known for being a nihilist, which is an ideology that rejects the fundamental of human existence. Concepts such as morality and values are perceived as baseless and they see no meaning in existence. But contrary to popular belief, Nietzsche was not really a nihilist. His philosophy draws roots in nihilism, but he actually condemns it in his work. One such work is called Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Do you recognize the name? Yes, it's what inspired the title for Thus Spoke Apocalypse animated short. In fact, all the chapters in the Colostown arc are named after Nietzsche's work. Chapter 26 is The Birth of Tragedy, Chapter 27 is Twilight of the Idols, and Chapter 28 is Beyond Good and Evil. For this video though, we'll talk more about Thus Spoke Zarathustra, since that is more reflective of Otto's character. Nietzsche's book has a few concepts that tie closely to Otto's story and character. First are the last man, apathic humans that gave up on life and have no willpower left to take fate in their own hands. They reflect the way Otto sees humanity. From his perspective, everything wrong with humans is born from their complacence and dependence on concepts such as fate and God. A human that allows any form of conceptual power to dictate their life has no worth in his eyes and eventually will fall and succumb to hatred and greed. On the other hand, we have the Übermensch, which literally translates to superhuman. By contrast, these are humans that live their lives after their own morals and values. They represent grounded individuals that fight for their values in a world that has given up on any form of ideals. They believe that human willpower is the only thing that can bring change. Sounds familiar? If yes, maybe that's because this is basically Otto's character in a nutshell. A man that through the sheer force of his willpower does the impossible and overcomes conceptual limitations such as fate, that, and God. He was never complacent nor relied on a higher power to comfort him when Kallen died. Regardless if we agree with Nietzsche's work or not, we cannot deny how well crafted Otto is as a character. The writers had a clear philosophical base and moved him in the right direction to make use of his potential. Kudos to Hoyoverse. As a writer myself, call me impressed. In the same way that Kiana sees the world as a beautiful place worth fighting for, Otto sees it as an ugly place full of malice and unfairness that has little to no worth. The only thing beautiful enough to be pursued for him was Kallen. But even so, the two of them had surprisingly similar philosophies. While it's true that at a first glance they seem to be the total opposite of each other, if you look closely, you'll see that both Kiana and Otto act based on the same principle. They both fight for all that's beautiful in the world from their perspective. While Kiana's idea of beauty includes humanity with both the good and bad, Otto's idea of beauty is the goodness he saw in Kallen. For Otto, Kallen is all that's beautiful in the world. But he saw semblances of beauty in others too. In his final moments, he clearly cared about Teresa and had hopes and respect for people like Durandal, Kiana, Welt, and Fu Hua. He often mentions that these people carry Kallen's will, referring to the fact that he sees some of Kallen's beauty in them. Otto's plan was never to destroy the world as he wanted everyone to believe. He made a deal with the Wheel of Honkai to access the power of the imaginary tree, but in his own words, he was just a slave shackled by his physical form. That's why his plan was to lose from the very beginning. He threatened to destroy the world only to incentivize people to stop him while nurturing their growth at the same time. He threw Durandal into the Stigmata space, anticipating that she would master the powers of her Stigmata. He knowingly left the Abyss Flower for Cele to take it and heal Teresa, the only one capable of nullifying the binding powers. He made Fu Hua fight Li Sushang while being aware that her past is still haunting her. And he instructed Nagamitsu to tell Kiana about imaginary renormalization, an ascension tool for his plan and their future fights against the Honkai. He often expressed that he needed the Herrscher of the Void to achieve his goal. People assumed that he needed Kiana to open up a path to the imaginary tree. And that's true, but not in the way that many people thought. He wanted Kiana to use imaginary renormalization on him to reach the ground zero of the imaginary tree. Only there he could truly realize his wish.
Kallen. 生きるんだ。
Otto decided that pursuing her goodwill was already too late. He was already painted in the colors of a villain, so he forced her to do it through the anger that originated from love. Imaginary renormalization is a concept based on quantum physics. Think of the imaginary tree as an infinite source of power and our physical plane as a place with finite power. Otto connected to the imaginary tree, so he basically had a battery that never ran out. Unfortunately, because his body was still in the physical world, he could not use that power to do what he wanted. Imaginary renormalization is a process in which, for a short time, the infinite power of the imaginary tree and the finite energy of the physical plane swap places. This is achieved by a very precise type of space distortion only possible to the Herrscher of the Void. When Kiana used her powers on Otto in chapter 28, for a short moment, Otto lost his unlimited source of power, giving Kiana enough time to destroy his body. This allowed Otto to ascend to a metaphysical plane and free himself from the imaginary tree's control. He forced himself into a place that let him control the very fabric of the multiverse. There, he traded the energy of his own soul to create a new timeline where Kallen is alive. Remember this? Yes, now we finally know what it means. The Wheel of Honkai told Otto back then that he needed to die, aka trade his soul in exchange for a possibility to create a new timeline where Kallen is alive. If this is not magnificent foreshadowing, I don't know what it is. Otto believed that imaginary renormalization will also help Kiana and the others in their future fights against the Honkai. As we all know, Honkai is a servant of the imaginary tree, which is an infinite source of power. But now, Kiana knows how to cut off that power for a short time to, I don't know, seal it on the moon or something. I don't think people realize how important this is. Otto gave them a weapon against the Honkai while making sure each of them grows stronger and achieved his goal at the same time. What a madman. You may hate him or love him, but you can't deny that he was a brilliantly crafted character. A man who rose above the stereotypical portrayal of a villain, and despite how impossible his goal seemed, he achieved it. For me, characters like Otto are what makes fiction worth investing my time in. I always believe that the role of a good character is to stir up emotions in the eye of the audience, be it positive or negative. It doesn't matter. Art is about expression, about feeling, and Otto made us all feel something, god damn it. Farewell, O great inventor. See you in the next world.